um I guess what my MO is, or what I'm trying to achieve is, like, I don't know, like I really love like Radiohead style stuff, like Johnny Greenwood style stuff. And like in a perfect world, like I'm really trying to what I think about a lot is like how can I take stuff like the stuff that Kali Malone does and Sarah Davachi and all those types of people with like just intonation and microtonality, and apply that to what I'm doing on the guitar. If I can't do it technically, obviously, because the way that normal guitar is fretted, then like how can I zero in on that feel? And some of that stuff recently has been like, oh, like how do I get a grasp of like titinabuli, like the Arvo part music theory stuff and whatnot. Um, Recently as well, like I've been getting into modular synthesis a lot. Like I've been doing more stuff on VCV Rack, if you're familiar, than I have like with guitar stuff over the past like 10 to 14 days. But um yeah, it's I guess that's like a good primer of me. I don't really get to describe myself in such nerdy terms, so knowing that you'd probably understand maybe a percentage of the stuff that I'm talking about, I feel like I'm in good hands. But yeah, I mean, overall, I'm not too proud of like my output. Like I could be making a lot more songs than I do. I could be making a lot more compositions than I do, but I always find myself just reverting back into the student role. Trying to figure out how do I get that hit? How do I get that feeling? I took a course. I don't know if you're familiar with School of Song and like what they do, like with the
Oh
song
yeah.
courses and stuff. So I did their course recently with Adrienne Lenker because I think that she's such an incredible songwriter. Um, and that was good. It was really fulfilling. But I just realized like, oh yeah, like I'm not trying to be someone on the guitar who just plays cowboy chords, or, is doing all these very folk kind of cliches. Like I really want to tap into a lot more of these things with like a classical edge or a drone edge, if you will. And how can you transpose those types of things? So yeah, I guess that if that makes any sense, that's
Makes tons of
kind of
sense.
who I am and where I'm at. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I can really relate to like a lot of that. I think like I've never really tried to learn a whole lot of Radiohead. I've taught like a little bit of Radiohead. But I understand like yeah, I understand that as like a jumping off point and then trying to sort of like coming out of like rock music or whatever, and then yeah, having all these other things that you're curious about and influenced by where like it's really not clear how the guitar could fit into it. Um, but there seems like, but you have the feeling that there's like a way. Yeah. Sorry, I'm like getting over a cold and I'm on like day
Oh,
9
you're good.
something, or not. It might have been COVID, but it's all good now. Yeah, so I can relate to a lot of what you're saying, and it sounds like there are a few kind of like different like dimensions to the project that you're laying out. Like actually, I have a piece of paper. Like it almost seems like it's because there's like a ton of stuff to talk about, but I want to like just break it down first. So there's almost like there's kind of like the instrument and goals and challenges with the instrument. Then there's the creative work, and so it's almost like guitar, and then like I kind of have some brain fog, so we're gonna like like I mean I'm like that's just a caveat because like I feel like I'm like thinking this many things and then I'm holding on to like this many thoughts, and it's not usually that way, you know? So
Or,
it's
yeah.
almost like anyway, there's kind of these two different like circles or bubbles, like that's one says guitar and the other says music, and like they can overlap, but as they're being described, they're like a little bit separate. And so I think like from yeah, so I think another thing just that I'm hearing that I can really relate to is like the like feeling like a student, and so you're trying to learn things and that's leading you to not to like do as much in the way of like making things. And I think different people approach that in different ways, but like yeah, I feel like that kind of has been me for in some ways like 10 years, and it was really only in the last like 3 years where I felt like I had gone far enough into sort of like the all of the different things to learn about that I could apply it to sort of like experimental performance, particularly involving the guitar. And so for me, that meant like I studied jazz guitar, and then I studied a lot of like music theory and experimental music stuff while also studying like composition, like writing for like acoustic instruments and making scores and stuff. And like I think in my like gut, I had the feeling that I eventually wanted to like reintegrate it into like a performance practice, which is what I've been kind of figuring out for the last few years, and I'm like still figuring out. Um, but they were so separate, and it seemed like to really do them meant keeping things like very separate, at least to like really learn them until I could find a way to combine them. So I totally understand that. And I think different people have different ways of approaching this. I think some people, while they're students, will just like make stuff that's kind of like the thing that they want to do, but it's not exactly the thing that they want to do, you know? And it's like a very like shallow version of the thing, and it's like student work, but it doesn't feel quite right. And for me, whenever I tried to proceed that way, it just made me feel like terrible. And so I just wound up trying to learn the things separately with the intention that I was eventually going to combine them like for real. And I guess now I'm in that stage where I'm trying to figure that stuff out. So I basically I can relate to all of this, and I have some like pretty quick pieces of like advice that are just good to like as far as like approaching these things separately. Like for one thing, just straight up learning Radiohead songs is probably really good, and like straight up just like learning those guitar parts. And then once you start to like play those like chord progressions and stuff too, like it's there's so much to learn there. And like Johnny Greenwood like has this incredible knowledge of like tonal harmony that like I have some of, but like his approach to it, like how you move from one chord to another, and it really feels like you're still in the land of like functional harmony, and you have like 5 and 1, and it's like the chords have like what you could call in music theory like Roman numeral names, like which is like functions. So like 1 and 4, or like there are all these really crazy things that kind of show up in romantic music, like the Neapolitan like second or something, like all these just like really crazy like harmonic functions that are like basically extensions of like the four chord. Like in tonal theory there's like 1 4 5 1, it's kind of your like basic arc, and then most of romantic music is basically just like what are all the crazy things that we can put in the place of the 4 chord. And so you can have entire chord progressions that are really just functioning as the subdominant, in that they're just like leading to the 5 chord, but you pass through all these really crazy colors and stuff as you're going through it. And like I know some stuff about that. Like I mean, I studied it in school. Romantic music hasn't been that big for me, but like Johnny Greenwood is like so, at least relative to like somebody who's not like a music theory professor, he's like so into that. And like if you can learn the music and then learn anything about what the chords are called, or you can work with somebody who can help you break them down, it's like there's just this incredible toolkit there. But anyway, so that's like kind of a side comment, but it's also just a good thing to do. I think then the big challenge with the guitar becomes, even if you're using pedals or whatever, like you have 6 strings and you pluck a string and it goes wow, and then it like decays and then it stops. And a lot of the stuff that we're talking about that's kind of in the second circle here, which is like music, is like music that's really not built around what we could call like resonating instruments, resonating as opposed to like sustaining. So like a sustaining instrument would be like a violin when you're bowing it, or like a synthesizer where you like press down a key and it just sustains for as long as you want it to. And that distinction, like sustainers versus resonators, was something this composer Pierre Boulez talked about a lot. That was like really important for him. Um yeah, so I can also just type that name in the chat.
I got it. A
Okay.
Boulez.
Yeah, yeah, cool. Yeah, just because like dividing up the resonators and the sustainers is like a really big thing for him in his orchestration. And there's a really good book about him that's like very like approachable for people who like don't know anything about music theory, like or like don't know anything about like notated music. That I read when I was probably 22. That's like called like The Musical Language of Pierre Boulez. I think the author's name is like Goldman. And like just Boulez is like such a central like avant-garde figure, even though he's kind of like he was really like confrontational and like I have mixed feelings about his influence on the place where I went to school because some people were like super into Boulez, so I talk shit about Boulez sometimes. But very important, real like figure and really really great books. I'm just mentioning that. But anyway, so that's kind of that's one challenge right away, and I have a lot of more like applied thoughts on how to like potential ways to bridge that gap. And a big part of my challenge with how I've approached or what I've been trying to do with the guitar in the last few years really has to do with making sense of that gap. Um, and then when we get fully over to the music side, like another piece of advice that I would give right away for like anybody who wants to learn like just intonation is to just like write out the harmonic series up to like the 64th harmonic, or write it out to like the 128th harmonic, and maybe even do that like once a week or something. Because like um there are a lot of reasons that it helps. Actually, there's a website that I use. It's like Michael Norris. He's like a like programmer and composer and like music theory music theory guy. Excuse me. And yeah, he has this thing where you can just like it'll just like generate all the info for like a harmonic series up to however many partials you put in. And so what you can do, just like share my screen. Okay, so you put in like I want C base, like a C series from octave, you know, like the lowest octave, octave 0, to the 128th partial. And like obviously on this part of the screen it's just going to look like nothing because it's really designed to like leave this many notes, but I'm not really looking at it for that. I'm really using it for the box. And so like I'll write like a C1. Actually, you know, just because this is like so fundamental, I have like all of my like archival stuff. Like these are all the notepads that I filled up when I was like writing notated music, and I'll just like show you what it looks like when I write it out by hand.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Cool. Yeah, it's fun to talk about this stuff. I haven't gotten to straight up talk about this in a teaching context before.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I can't. Your screen won't go full for me just because you're sharing your screen. By the way, if you end up showing me a book, let me see if I could like remove the pin.
Oh yeah, I'll come back in a sec.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, let's see. I just kind of grabbed a random notebook, but if it's from my last...
like, I'm still like very much wrapping my head around all this stuff. Like even if you ask me like what the definition is, I probably wouldn't be able to pin it down 100%. Just been like I just understand like the idea of like how like there's a lot of like mathematics that go into
Oh
determining
yeah,
distance between one note and another
totally.
compared to like the way in which um what is it equal temperament is just a bit more compatible to doing things like triads and whatnot.
Yeah. Okay. So I can also like send you all the resources that I use to learn about this stuff, but I'll give you like a really quick introduction to the harmonic series.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So um basically like when notes like resonate, like when like a sound, like when there's like you have a string and you like pluck the string, um assuming that this is true. So there are like sounds that we can call harmonic and sounds that we can call inharmonic. Sounds that are harmonic means that they are working with the harmonic series, which is like a lot of sounds, and then sounds that are like inharmonic do not. So like if you hear like white noise, that's like an inharmonic sound, or like a cymbal is like an inharmonic sound. It's more like noisy, and a sound that sounds like a clear pitch is usually more like harmonic. So this is true of like a string. So if you pluck a string, let's like grab this bass because it's the closest thing that I've got. So if you pluck a string, like I'll just pluck the A string, you have this sound. Can you hear that?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So we can call this like the note that the string is playing. It's the length. of the string from where it starts to where it stops. So that's one way of thinking about it, is just like the note. The other thing that we can say is that this is like this frequency or this pitch that we're hearing, this A, is also the lowest frequency in this sound that we're hearing. That isn't just the note A, but it is the sound of the A string being plucked on a bass guitar. And so we can think about the note A as like a sine wave that's like 110 hertz or something. You know, it's just doo, except a different pitch and lower. But then when we think about how this, like how the note actually sits on the bass guitar, it's the same like pitch, but it's a different sound. Does that much make sense?
Uh, can you elaborate on
Yeah,
the?
for example, the tone of a sine wave playing the same note is different than the sound of a bass guitar playing this note, which is
Yes.
different than the sound of a piano playing the note.
Yes.
Okay, yeah. So it's just like timbre is different.
And so what? And so is there a theory based factor as to why
Yes.
that is? Okay.
Yeah, totally. And that's what I'm about to get into. Okay. So the harmonic series happens when we pluck a string. Um, we get the fundamental, which is the length of the full string. And then we also get like many, 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 many harmonics. And so what harmonics are mathematically is like we pluck the string and the string resonates the full length, and it also resonates at the halfway point. So it resonates at like this point, which we can call like the octave harmonic, or in the harmonic series, we would call this the second harmonic, because the open string or like the fundamental is the first harmonic, because it's where the series starts. And then our third harmonic happens at the perfect fifth. And then our fourth harmonic happens at the perfect fourth. And the third harmonic is what happens when we divide the string into 3 equal parts. The fourth harmonic is what we get when we divide the string into 4 equal parts. And then it keeps on going. The fifth harmonic. And so this is like seventh, no, that's the sixth. I need to use a pick to try to get the sound. My thumb isn't doing it. Then there's the seventh harmonic. 8. That's 10. 9. You know, and so what happens is that we're dividing the string into a half, into thirds, into fourths, into fifths, and so on. And what we're doing when we're doing that is also multiplying the fundamental frequency by whatever the harmonic is that we're dealing with. So the octave harmonic, this is a jump.
This is where everything gets like super heady for me.
Okay, cool. Fortunately, this like doesn't actually matter that much, for at least the way that I work with just intonation, but I can explain it in very fundamental terms. I think you can get it. So
Pardon me for laughing. I just
that was totally fine. Okay, so let's say that this is A equals 110 hertz. I don't actually, it might be 55, like, because I'm not sure which octave it is, but I'm just going to arbitrarily say that we can say this is 110. So then our second octave is going to be 110 times 2, which is 220. Does that much? Okay, cool. So then our third octave.
and you're playing the A string on the 12th fret, second harmonic.
Yeah, exactly. And so then our third harmonic is going to be also, it's like really fun to talk about this. This is like, I've spent a lot of time thinking about this. So, okay, so our third harmonic is 110 times 3, which is
330.
exactly. Okay, cool. And then our fourth harmonic is times 4, so that is
440.
exactly. And then our fifth is what?
550.
Yeah, exactly. Cool. And then from there the pattern repeats. So that's kind of how we get our like that's basically what's going on, is that we have a fundamental, which is 110, and then we just multiply it by 2, by 3, by 4, by 5, and so on. And then on the bass, I mean, this is also true of the guitar, but on the bass, it's even cooler because the strings are longer and thicker, so the harmonics go up even higher, or the audible harmonics go up even higher. So check this out. Like the note just keeps on getting higher until like my finger's way up here, and then it just sounds like I'm muting the bass string. So, so those are just harmonics going up. And the reason that that happens is that like this is more applying it to stringed instruments, which is super useful for the guitar. So this is more like how it fits on a string. But if you think about it, it's like if this is 1/7 of the string, and this is 1/8 of the string, and this is 1/9 of the string, and this is 1/10 of the string, and this is 1/11 of the string, you know, you can just keep getting these fractions as you slide this way. So that's why this is an easy way to do it. A lot of people who play like bowed string instruments do it by going like this. Like getting closer and closer to the fingerboard, like violinists and like bass, like classical bass players and stuff will do this. But for me, it's like it's really hard to like assess distance down here, whereas assessing distance up here is really easy because you can relate it to frets. You know? Does that make sense?
Not on first try. Let
Okay,
me
cool. So
try.
I'll say more about it. So if I were to identify the 1/4 point of the string somewhere in here, I would be totally guessing. Like, I guess I could practice it, but like maybe it's here, but not quite.
We're just talking about measurement, like from end to end.
Yeah. Whereas here, I know where the 1/4 point of the string is. In other words, where the fourth harmonic is, because it's just right above the fifth fret. And there's an easy map here, which is the frets. So I can just be like, oh, the harmonic that's 2 octaves is right here. You know? And so I figure out where the harmonics are by knowing where they are relative to the fret. So for example, the 7th harmonic I know is like slightly before the 3rd fret. I just know that it's like right there. And that's kind of practice, but it's like I use the frets to help me know where the harmonics are.
What is the difference between like the the point on the fretboard and the harmonic? Because I initially when you said the fourth harmonic is just above the fifth fret, I thought that you meant like, oh, this is just on the fourth fret.
Oh yeah, okay. So I think I follow what you're saying.
What makes the seventh harmonic at the fifth fret?
Right. Okay. So
Is it that the
yeah,
string is like you're dividing the string into sevenths, and that's how you're coming up with that approximation?
right. Okay. So there are kind of two different types of answers. There's like how I know it and how I figured it out, and then there's like the mathematical why. And so for me, I mostly figured it out by like messing around. Like I didn't really have anybody teach me this. I just kind of was really into it and kind of figured it out. And over time, I figured out that there were just certain places where I could find certain harmonics, particularly over here. And it started me just improvising and just like hitting this area, knowing that like a sound was going to come out. And then I started realizing that they were in specific places and the harmonics were in specific places and they were consistently in those places across strings. And then that you could just do this and get these cool sounds, you know? So that was kind of how I did it. I sort of trial and errored it. But the sort of mathematical answer is that there are kind of, and this gets like a little bit mathy, but not like super mathy. Basically, we're working with dividing the string into like equal parts, like integers. So like into halves or into fourths or into fifths or whatever. Like, and by integers, I just mean it's like 1/5. Like whatever the number is in like the denominator is just like a very simple number, even if it's like 11, you know? And then we have frets, which are part of a system called equal temperament. And the mathematics of equal temperament are like insane. Like I don't know those mathematics at all. I know that they're based in some sort of like logarithmic scale, and that it wasn't until like the like 19th century that people really had it like dialed in. because the math was just like that crazy. Um, so what I'm talking about doing is basically like there's this sort of like logarithmic system where like as you move down the neck, the frets get slightly closer together. And I'm using that as like geography, sort of, so I can look at it and know where on the string I am. So it's like a visual reference point. And then from there, I can map the harmonics that I like to use. So it's not like I know all the harmonics on the instrument, but I know where kind of the sweet spots are for like what I need. And if I needed to like figure out more and practice them, I could probably figure them out and practice them. But for the ones that I want access to, I have them sort of just mapped in this way. So the third fret is where the third fret is for a bunch of really like complicated mathematical reasons that I don't fully understand, just because the math of equal temperament isn't like something I'm super deep into. But I know where the third fret is. And I know that if I put my finger on the third fret and then I move it slightly back like this, I get this point where if I pluck the string, I get the seventh harmonic. And from there, I know that because of how the string breaks up into 7 parts, I know that this is like 1/7 of the string. But I know it because it's the 7th harmonic, and I know that sound. Sounds like Suicide or something, or like some, or like Television, or like some Velvet Underground, like some like New York like rock band. But anyway, so I found it by the sound, and then I can relate it to the kind of simple, just like whole numbers based math that I know about. Does that make sense?
Yeah, a little bit more. I
Okay,
feel like I'm still going to need to wrap my head around it, but yeah, I
totally.
feel like that's a fair enough primer.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. So that's like how you find harmonics like on the neck and some stuff about like the harmonic series. And so another cool property of the harmonic series, how am I going to do this? You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to tune the D string of this bass down to an A so that I can show you more stuff. Cool. Okay. So now I'm just doing this so that I can get like multiple harmonics at the same time. So so with just intonation, if we can just take that to mean finding notes like through the harmonic series, there's a lot that we can do. And the thing is, people talk about just intonation as if it is um like a system or like a prescribed way of doing things. But the history of just intonation is the history of people like messing around and finding stuff, which is really cool. And so like there are people, especially academics, who are trying to build like a reputation on like being like an authority on just intonation. But it's like fundamentally experimental in that all of the people who pioneered just intonation were like finding their own ways of doing it, especially like before there was like the technology to allow you to like easily get the notes. So like all the people that I was most influenced by, like Lamont Young, James Tenney, this Romanian guy, Horatiu Radulescu, they were just like trying things in like the 50s and 60s and like 70s, like when there was no clear way to do this. And if you had a violinist and you were like played the 7th harmonic, they were like, I don't know how to do that. Like there was no, like they were just like winging it. So they each found their own system, and all the systems have very different sounds and stuff. And also, side note, I wrote this like 40-page long paper about Radulescu. That's just all about his harmonic approach that I can send to you if you want.
Sure.
It's just breaking all this stuff down pretty. And he has this piece called Clepsydra that's like 45 minutes long, and it's for like 16 pianos that are like turned on their sides, and you take the top off, and so you're just like playing all of these pianos with like violin bows and stuff, but where you like take the bow off, so you just have the bow hairs, and so you're just like bowing strings and stuff. And it's actually really simple. Like it sounds crazy, but I break it down and like I reduce all the chords, and it's basically just a harmonic series based on G, modulating over the course of 45 minutes to a harmonic series based on like C. So it's just G to C. And it's like 45 minutes and it sounds insane because he's using all these crazy harmonics, but it's two harmonic series. And like, yeah, so I can just send you the stuff that I wrote about that. Getting a little bit ahead of myself here. Okay, so we've got our note A, and then we have all of these sounds. All these harmonics are like sounds. And it just keeps on going up. And we have these sounds relative to our fundamental of A, but we also have these sounds relative to the other sounds. So for example, this is what it sounds like when you play the fifth harmonic and the fourth harmonic at the same time. Whoop. In other words, it's like a major third. Ba-da. Does that make sense?
I what was it that you said right before you played the notes?
Okay, yeah. So we've got our fourth harmonic, which is the second octave, and then our fifth harmonic, which is two octaves and a major third. And
Okay.
do you know what a major third is and stuff? Is that
Yeah.
okay? Cool. So this is literally just a major third. But it's a little bit different than the major third on the piano. For reasons that I can talk about like in a second. But basically the idea is that we can get notes in relation to the fundamental and also in relation to each other. So this is like nice, and we're getting these notes in relation to each other, like relative to a fundamental. Yeah, and that's basically it. So let's say that we want to play the seventh harmonic and the eighth harmonic. It's like, I don't know how much you can hear of this.
Near it.
Okay, cool. So it's almost like a major second, but the difference between the seventh harmonic and like the difference between this G and the G on the piano is a much bigger gap than the difference between like this major third and the major third on the piano. The reason for this is like what I think of, or I mean, there are different ways to like conceptualize this. The way that I do it, I'll go back to the screen share thing. Also, actually, I'm just gonna like reactivate my Zoom Pro subscription because I should just do that.
Yeah, no worries. Maybe to re-log in or anything, I'll just wait for a link if need be.
I hope not. I hope we're good. Okay, cool. We are good. Awesome. Okay, so the way that I conceive of it is just, I'll go back to the screen share. The way that I conceive of it is where it says here, like sense deviation from 12 tone equal temperament or 12 tet, not to be confused with Fortet, one of my favorite musicians. Okay, so if it's 0 sense deviation from 12 tone equal temperament, that means that this note is exactly the same one that we get on the piano. And so partial number 2, and partial just means harmonic. It's just another word for it. So partial number 2 is an octave. Here we're dealing with like a C fundamental instead of an A fundamental. But you know, so octave 0, octave 1, either way, 0 sense deviated from the octave. So what sense mean is just like breaking a semitone into 100 smaller parts. And so like if you're playing around with like a pitch shifter and like a DAW, like I used Reaper for a long time and now I use Ableton, then like there'll often be a thing that's like sense and you can like bend notes up and down that
Yeah,
way.
that's where my mind is going.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so this is exactly that. So our fifth harmonic
Wait,
is
so I'm sorry. So the partial number is
it's like the harmonic number. So 1 is our fundamental, and then 2 is going to be our octave harmonic, and then the third harmonic is the third partial. Harmonic and partial mean the same thing.
okay.
Yeah. Yeah, and so also we can see here, actually what'll be even better
And so
is
second harmonic again, sorry, is you playing. So the first harmonic is open string in the case of you holding the bass, and then the second harmonic is 12th fret.
yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, and then you can also see here, like, so partial number 1 or fundamental or open string is 16 hertz, just because I set it to that, so it's a very low number. And then our second partial is 32 hertz, which is twice 16, and so on, and then 48, which is going to be 3 times, and then 64, which is 16 times 4. And I have that mental math really quickly, like, together for reasons that are related to this, but basically you can just see it's like fundamental times 1, fundamental times 2, fundamental times 3, the frequency thing that we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Awesome. So then
And so is the frequency, like, is there any legend to that from a theory perspective, or is it could the frequency be anything? Because we were
right.
talking in terms of 110 before, right?
Right. Okay, yeah. So the important thing is that we have like a starting frequency, and it's nice when it's a whole number for math reasons. And that's pretty much it. So our starting frequency or our fundamental, we can almost just call like X. Like it can just be it's any number. And the important thing is what we're going to do to get the other harmonics from it, which is just multiply it by like a series of numbers like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on.
Okay.
Cool. Does that make sense?
Somewhat, yeah. All of this is going to require me doing my own studying and probably rewatching this again if I can and whatnot,
Cool.
but sounds
Yeah,
good.
I'll put it on the yeah, I'll put it on the page so it's there.
Awesome.
Yeah, okay. Cool. Wow. Man, it's really fun to talk about this. Okay, yeah. So when I say that our starting frequency can be like anything, it's like, all the strings, these are tuned to the same note, but even if they weren't, they all have their own like harmonic series associated with them, you know, because they're strings and you can get the octave harmonic on any string. Does that much make sense?
Do you mind repeating that
Oh
again?
yeah, sure. Yeah, so every string has like a harmonic series that's associated with it. And so basically no matter what string you're playing, if you play the 12th fret harmonic, you're going to get the you're going to get the octave of that note.
Yeah.
And then even if you tune it like slightly down, so you're like slightly out of tune, you'll still get an octave above the open string. And so that's kind of the sense in which like our fundamental frequency could be anything, like off of any frequency we can write a harmonic series or we can like generate a harmonic series.
Okay. But there's no like fixed frequency for a note like a D at
Right.
octave
Okay.
zero would never always be the same, I guess.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So that makes a lot of sense as a question. So there is, and that's why it says like it defaults to 16.35 for C. And so there's a tuning convention that's like A equals 440 hertz. Have you heard about this?
Yes, but it's nothing that I never really looked
Okay.
into.
Yeah, I mean it's not that it's not
Funny,
that important for
a
art.
side note,
Yeah.
because not to disrupt you. I know more about like the 432, 440 hertz stuff from politics than I do music.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, yeah. So yeah. Um so A440 hertz is just like an orchestral tuning convention. And over time, like I guess like I'm not an authority on this, but over time orchestras have tuned slightly higher, and so I guess I think it was like in the Baroque period or something they would tune to like 432 instead of 440. And so like because all tuners and everything assume A equals 440 hertz, like that's why here a C means 16.35 hertz, because like this is a C that's in tune with A equals 440 A equals 440 hertz according to equal temperament. Does that
Okay.
make sense? Yeah. And so if you look up like frequency values for notes, then you might get something like D equals 18 hertz or like things like that, like for like a super low D. Um, and that's just those are like the kind of tuning conventions based around A equals 440.
Okay.
Yeah.
So wouldn't isn't the whole thing kind of improperly skewed from the beginning if you're looking at if you're still looking at these types of things from the vantage point of equal temperament instead of pure temperament?
Yeah, well, so the thing is that pure temperament, well, they're both relative. Like we need some frequent we need a fundamental. And whether it's 16 hertz or 16.35 hertz, it doesn't really matter that much so long as it's one of them and we know which one it is, you know?
Okay.
So for me, A440 is like a fine starting point. There's this composer that I was and would like to be really influenced by again when I get to like make more kind of straight up, I don't know, music that really is dealing with pitch in this way. This composer, Catherine Lamb, who's really, really incredible. And she'll like pick arbitrary fundamentals that are close to like an equal tempered note, close enough that you can call it G, you know? Um, but it'll be like, I don't know, I'm pulling this out of nowhere, but something like G equals 50 hertz. And she'll tune her viola to these things. So like the low string of the viola will be like this frequency, and then the G string will be like this frequency. And so she's picking them by frequency numbers that are specific. Like she can set like a tuner to like play 150 hertz or whatever and then tune to it. But she's picking them because they're numbers that are easy to work with in terms of like multiplication. Um, and from there, their relationships to each other matter a lot. But whether it's G equals 150 hertz or G equals 153 hertz doesn't actually matter. Like the way that we hear is proportional and like relative. And so this kind of gets into like the politics of the A432 thing, where there are people who are not, as far as I know, like really scientifically engaged, who are like, this other frequency is better for your brain. And maybe there is some neuroscience that will be found about that at some point. But my understanding of it is that we hear pitch relatively. Um, so whether it's 432 or whether it's 440, what really matters is that everything else is in tune with that enough that it sounds like it's in tune, you know?
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Okay. So this is kind of a very long preamble, but it is introducing the idea of the harmonic series. And I feel like if I, or when I have been in your position, and I've taken in this sort of information, the question that's always followed to me is, or the feeling that's kind of followed to me is like, okay, but like, how do I make music with it? Or like, what's the application of this? Like, it's cool, but I don't know what to do with it. Okay. And so, just because I found a notebook where I wrote out the harmonic series up to 128. No, I wrote it out up to 64 here. Basically, I'll just like show you, it's like really faint like pencil stuff, but whenever I was starting a new piece in like late college, and then I didn't actually go to grad school, but sort of like when I was in my pseudo grad school period, I just studied with a composer that I loved for like 2 years, and that was really amazing. um the first stage in my writing out a new piece would just be to write out the harmonic series. This was until 64 because I was a lot newer to it, and later on until 128. And what happens when you write out a harmonic series like this, like I wrote out C and then C, and you keep writing them, what you keep finding are intervals. And they're all different. So I also wrote out like the sense deviation above all of the notes. because the sense deviation thing is like really where the notes start to like matter and have their own personality. And so like the seventh harmonic is like a very distinctive sound. And when you really hear that sound, it's like, whoa, like it does not sound like a minor seventh on a piano. Like it's something else. And so I guess I mean, there's approaching it like experientially, which I should also talk about because it's just like so like important and more important than writing it out. But when you write it out like this, an important thing to be thinking about that I was thinking about, or at least something that was important for me, was like, whoa, there are all of these colors, like all of these harmonics are different sounds. And like, it's like the difference between having a palette with like 7 colors or 12 colors, like whether it's like 7 notes in a major scale or 12, equal tempered intervals, 12 keys on a piano, versus like literally like an infinite number of colors. Like, I mean, the series goes on forever. And then if you start mixing and matching things from different harmonic series, then that's 2 forevers, so it's just like so many options. So I would write it out like this, and that would just get me thinking about it. And just really quick, the 64 versus 128 thing. The harmonic series, like people talk about it being like a spiral or whatever, just because the way that it works, it repeats itself at every octave. So like, our first octave is just an octave. And then our second octave, is like octave, fifth octave, 2, 3, 4 in the series. And then our next octave is basically like a dominant seventh chord. Ba, 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 ba. But that fifth is still in there. That perfect fifth from the octave before. So does that much make sense?
I'm still just generally struggling with the harmonics stuff.
Okay, so I'll show you what I mean in the screen share. So our first octave is just C going to C. And then our next octave has the notes C and G. And then our next octave, which is the fourth going to the eighth, we have C, E, G, B flat, C.
And why do we have these?
So these are just the pitches that we get when we multiply a fundamental by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And so they're just properties that like appear because of science and like the beauty of science or whatever. Okay. So then in the next octave, we get, again, we have our dominant seventh chord. We have C, E, G, B flat, C. So it's the same as this octave, the same notes. But, and also, by the way, that's, the eighth harmonic here is an octave above the fourth harmonic. The fifth harmonic here times 2 is the 10th harmonic. They're both E, and they have the same sense deviation from the octave, or sorry, from equal temperament. They're just in different octaves. So 8 is the same as 4, 10 is the same as 5, 12 is the same as 6, which is the same as 3, 14 is the same as 7, 16 is the same as 8. Does that make sense?
Yes, I think so.
Okay, cool. And so what happens is that each time that we go around the octave again, we get a new set of notes. So then we get our 9th harmonic, which is D. We get our 11th harmonic, which is an F sharp. That's like super far away. It's 49 cents, which is almost what we could call a quarter tone away from the note on the piano. We get our 13th harmonic, and then we get our like a 15th harmonic, which is a B. And so those weren't contained in this octave, but they are in this octave. And so there's this sort of like spiral shape that continues where like, 16 is the same as 8, 18 is the same as 9, 20 is the same as 10, and so on. And so what happens is that each time that you go around the series, you just keep getting more and more kind of like fine points between the notes that you were previously getting. Yeah. And so basically like when you write out the harmonic series like this, and you're just like looking at all of these notes, you just start to find these patterns. And by writing it out like repeatedly, you get to spend more time with the patterns. And then you're like, wait a second, the 20th harmonic, what is that? I know the 10th harmonic. What was it again? Minus 14 cents. Okay. And you over time you kind of learn to fill in the blanks and like memorize some of these things, you know? So that's pretty much what like writing with the harmonic series is. Or that's what writing the harmonic series out is. But then the question that comes from all of this is like, how do I make music with it? Which is a question that everybody who's ever worked in just intonation, or in alternate tuning systems that are based on the harmonic series, answers on their own. And so it's really cool to look at different people who are working with this from a creative perspective. And for me, it was like I was like in my last year of music school, and I was like, holy shit, like I don't want to write 12-tone music, like I don't want to write serialism. Like other people figured out how to not do it. Like I can't, like writing this music makes me miserable. Like how do I do this? And so I was like, what can a bass do? Harmonics. How do I find the harmonics? What do I do with the harmonics? And then I listened to like Lamont Young or like Radulescu or something, and I'd be like, oh, that's what they were doing. And so that helped me out. But anyway, I know I'm like bombarding you with like a shit ton of information, but I have one more thing that is how I work now that I'll show you because I think it's like super useful.
Yeah.
Okay. Where is Max? I'm just looking at all these things on my computer. Max MSP. Totally going blank. I'm going to search for it. I'm looking at it, but I can't see it. Cool. Okay. So I'm just gonna like show you how I do some stuff in Max MSP, which is like a program that has kind of like an intimidating reputation. But it's not it's not that like it doesn't have to be that crazy. I was working on this gigantic just intonation patch, and I'm trying to find a good way to like get started with it that makes it accessible. Okay, there we go. This one's simple. So I'm going to share my screen. All right, so
Is this kind of like a pure data kind of platform?
yeah, I forget. Pure data is like coding.
Yeah, yeah,
Or it's
essentially. You get like a blank canvas like this, and then you get to do a lot of input kind of stuff.
right. Oh, I think pure data might just be open source Max. If that's
Oh, maybe, yeah.
I get it
I
mixed
think
up with Super Collider, but I know there's like an open music. Yeah, no, I think this is pretty much exactly pure data. Okay. So, I'm just going to basically show you what's going on here. We have like a volume. All these things are like volume adjusters. And right now everything's set to 0 just so that there's no sound yet. And okay, I'm going to remove a bunch of stuff from the screen. Max isn't authorized. What? All my stuff is mixed up right now. Okay, cool. So now it's going to be even simpler. Okay, so I'm just turning volume on so that we'll get sound. The sound is too low for my computer. Okay, so what's going on is that this note here, whoops. So this note here is our fundamental, which I just set to 100. And then I'll bring this up. And it's low, but like, can you, is it sharing the sound?
Yep.
Cool, okay. And then 200. And then 300. And you're hearing all of this and everything? Cool. Whoa. That's our 15th harmonic. We're going to keep it simple here and just go times 7. Make this look nice. And now I'm going to start taking some notes out just so we can appreciate it more. So that's just like a dominant chord, but it's like a really pretty dominant chord. Now let's say we want to maybe add the 9th harmonic, which I can tell you is just like the major 9th. So basically, this is just a way that we can start to get some chords, or start to get some sounds, and start getting notes that are literally just intervals. And so what I'm doing here is taking 100, multiplying it by 5, and then 500, and bam, that's just like the 5th harmonic. So we can just listen to the sound of the 4th and the 5th harmonic together. Yeah. Okay. So now what you can start to do is remember the distance between notes as its own interval. And this is where this is the last thing that I'll get into because it's like a ton of information, but we can call this major third, which is different than the major third on the piano. We can call this like a 4 to 5 major third. And do you have any guesses as to why we would call this a 4 to 5 major third?
Something with a ratio.
Yeah. So it's literally just like this, we'll call this number A is 400 and number B is 500. And together, the ratio that they have, 400 to 500, is like 4 to 5 when it's like most simply expressed.
So what does that mean for every 400 hertz that play for the
it just means that there's just like a 4 to 5 relationship. So for any frequency, this is, yeah, okay. So we'll just say, I'll copy paste one of these guys and I'll say, add another one of these. Whoops. Okay. This is going to be, am I doing the math right here? Yeah, this is basically, we have any number. So we're going to input 100 hertz. And then if I did this right, we should get 120, 125. Let's see if that sounds right. I think it's supposed, you know, I'm going to make the number higher. I'm going to make this 200 so that it's not so low. Okay, cool. Okay, cool. Yeah. So basically, what we did was we took this note, which is 200 hertz, we multiplied it by 5, and then divided it by 4. And so multiplying any frequency by 5 gives you a perfect fifth, sorry, a major third, 2 octaves above. And then by dividing that frequency by 4, we pulled it back down 2 octaves. So now we just have this nice major third that's like right here. Does that make sense?
How come? I mean, obviously, layman question here probably has an obvious answer, but why? How come you don't just? How come you don't just multiply it by 1.25?
There's so you can, and I thought about mentioning that, but the thing is that like as the ratios get crazier, the numbers that like the decimals that you'd have to memorize just get a lot longer. And so this one's really nice because it's like very like approachable. But let's say that we want like even like 11 over 13 or like 11/13ths. I don't know what this is. This is going to be like a really wacky, like, I don't know, kind of probably ugly. So this is the distance between the 11th and the 13th harmonic. So this is like recreating that distance. And that's a sound. It's kind of a minor third-ish. But what it's cool about like, or what we can do when we think about them in terms of ratios like this, is that we can get any distance between any two intervals in the series that we want. So let's say that we want to hear the distance between 29 and 33. You can just do that. And so then you can just keep on going too. Like some people get into harmonics that are like above the 128th harmonic, you know, and so you start getting into these things that like you can say, I don't know, like 133 above 128 or something, but like memorizing that decimal is like, that's a lot harder, you know, or it's like more like arbitrary. It's just like random information that isn't as connected to like a clear purpose. So yeah. Does this make sense?
Again, it's a lot, but I'm very much fascinated and like want to wrap my head around this a lot further. Uh,
Cool.
yeah, this was so awesome. Thank you so much for breaking all of this down. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's
Uh,
super fun to talk about.
I guess you mentioned in the beginning that that there were like resources that I should look into. Like, are there any? Is there any like book or anything like I'd be open to checking it out?
Yeah. Yeah, so because this call's being like recorded and I'm gonna put it up on the page, I'll just like say a bunch of stuff and then it's just like here. Um, so yeah. Um, Sorry, I minimized my screen and I think it's like I think it's just something about like the fidelity of the camera or something that's having the effect on you that I was talking about at the beginning. Like it's definitely not you. It's just like the resolution or something. It's funny and I
Oh,
just
okay.
yeah. Yeah, okay. So there's this composer Mark Sabat who's like really somebody who's turned just intonation into sort of like an academic field of study. And so I mean artistically there are things about that that I have mixed feelings about, but he has all of these PDFs, like all of these writings that he gives away for free on his website that are really incredible. Um, and I'll just like type his name into the chat. Mark Sabat, Mark with a C. Um, yeah. And then yeah, and so the thing is like there's one paper of his that's pretty like it's very fundamental and it basically talks about what I was just explaining, but it's like a lot less easy to like follow. So I think any like the way to practice this is to just write out the harmonic series a few times, and then everything will make like a lot more sense. Because then you'll start to see there are all these different major thirds, and like the 81st harmonic is a major third and the fifth harmonic's a major third, and they're slightly different. And then Mark Sabat might be talking about what you could call the Pythagorean major third versus like the Ptolemaic major third, which is the difference between the 85th harmonic and the 80th harmonic, or sorry, the 81st harmonic and the 80th harmonic. And the 80th harmonic is just the fifth harmonic, and it's like it's really like heady, but if you write everything out a few times, it gets a lot less heady, and it's more just like, oh, these are the notes. But anyway, so Mark Sabat, he is an incredible resource, but there that's kind of my caveat. And then otherwise, I think looking at a bunch of music is good. I can send you the thing that I wrote about this composer Horatiu Radulescu, and a lot of Radulescu's writings, or sorry, a lot of Radulescu's stuff is on YouTube. There's like a score follower thing, I think, for his fifth string quartet, which was really my entrance point into this whole thing. Like, I came across the score for his fifth string quartet, and I was like, what the fuck is this? And like, basically, it's like if you get a hold of a piece of music and you're trying to break it down and you have the means to do it, then the next piece of music that you approach will get easier. And so really, I would say it's just important to start somewhere. Actually, there's a James Tenney piece. I'll just write all these names down. Obviously, Lamont Young, James Tenney. Yeah, there's a James Tenney piece called Harmonium. Or there's more than one, but they're like, because these were just kind of like the people who are really figuring it out. I don't want to take up your whole night or anything, but like it's just like this piece. I'll show you I'll drop the score in our chat. It's like you can just see here, like there's A and then there's an E, which is a perfect fifth, and it's +2 cents. So this is like a 2-3 perfect fifth. And then you get this note, which is a C sharp -14 cents, and it's like, oh, that's like the fifth harmonic, and it's all just right here. And then you start to get some weird things like what's going on with this F sharp, like how does that relate to things? But then the D comes in, and you're like, oh, well this F sharp is the like the 5/4 major third of D, and because A is a perfect fifth above D, this whole thing is kind of in a series based on D, and like you can start to put it together, and it's like I get something from thinking about it that way because it gives me more sounds that I can make music with. So the puzzle for me is very directly related to like immediate creative output. But it's also just, hopefully this is just a nice piece of music to listen to. And so yeah, so you just kind of figure it out over time, you know? But really the best thing you can do is like write the harmonic series out. And then even if you build a harmonic series in something like in Max, like I was doing, and you just start messing with volume dials. Like if you do that up to like the 64th harmonic, and then you just have like 64 sine waves that are just like making a ton of noise, and you try playing around with volume levels and it always sounds different. And then you go to Dreamhouse, you're like, oh wait, that sounds a lot like what I was just doing, you know? Like, do you know Dreamhouse?
I
The
in Lamont Young's place,
Yeah, yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, so Lamont Young's Dreamhouse installation, at least they just like changed it, so I don't know what it is now, but what it was literally just like the Max thing that I'm showing you with like 35 tones or something like that he chose like really carefully, but it is just that. And it's just based on one harmonic series. So he's just like, cuz like every time you go around the octave you get more and more crazy notes. It's like the higher up in pitch you go, the more notes he's using and the crazier they sound. And it is really cool to listen to, and like it's really cool the way that it works in the space and you walk around and you move your head around, and like I've spent a lot of time there and it's like one of my favorite things. But in a way it's like really simple. It's just that it sounds intimidating because this is a lot of words. But it's like it takes a few hours to kind of get your hands on stuff, and then it's a lot less difficult, you know? So,
Right.
yeah.
So interesting. Um, Yeah, and then, my last question: when you mentioned memorizing harmonics, when at at the beginning when you were showing me the Michael Norris page, what are you referring to specifically? Or you refer or because there isn't any fixed, um, equation as we outlined. So like, is it memorizing 1 through 128 of like a specific key or
Oh yeah. Okay. So um the specific pitches can change, but the pattern is always the same. So the fifth harmonic is always a major third and two octaves above the fundamental.
okay,
Yeah, and so if you write out the harmonic series on C and then you write it out on D, it's like the one in D is going to be a whole step above the one that's based on C. All the notes will be like one step above because you're just starting on a different note, but the pattern is completely the same.
okay, all right, interesting. I'll be taking a look into that further.
Yeah. It's almost like a
And
scale. Sorry, one more thing just on this subject.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
like it's almost like a scale where every octave it has twice as many notes and it keeps on going forever, but it's just one scale. And so it's like C major and D major are the same scale, they're just starting on a different point. It's like the harmonic series will always be an octave and then a fifth and then or an octave and then an octave and a fifth and then two octaves and then two octaves in a major third and then two octaves in a fifth, two octaves in a minor seventh, three octaves and so on. It's like it's that same pattern for every like no matter what note you're starting on.
Okay,
Yeah.
interesting. So focus on memorizing the distance, not any like specific frequencies or like in hertz or anything like that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I think about like when I'm working in with these like max patches, I think about the actual frequency number for about as much time as it takes me to like decide on a fundamental. I pick D a lot because D minor is the saddest of all keys, according to Spinal Tap. I just for some reason and it like sits well on the guitar, so I kind of just work with the D fundamental a lot. And so it's like D equals 0.935 or something. That's not quite it, but it's like whatever it is in equal temperament, I write it down. And then after that, I'm just working in ratios and stuff.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, I'm super excited to get into this further. The thing that was so difficult was like trying to figure out how to like you go on the internet and you try and like just look up how do you really get into this further because it feels like all the videos are just like telling you words that you don't really comprehend yet and
Yeah.
there isn't really any clear answer. I guess my last question for you is, and please, like, I encourage you to answer me as honestly as possible. Like, am I as someone who like is not as really only has like an elementary level of theory just as it relates to like a classical guitar, for example, am I too in over my head in trying to approach this now? Like I'm a big proponent, like even with me taking guitar lessons, I know that I'm not where I want to be or playing what I want to play, but I am kind of putting faith into this idea of you have to start with baby steps. You have to start at kindergarten. And, if you were to tell me, don't even focus on this until you have XYZ figured out, I would take that to heart, of course.
Hmm. Yeah. So, um, there's something that I want to say. I'm trying to think about how to say it. Um, I think because my approach to just intonation has been so, um, I mean, very, very like sort of for somebody who kind of studied it in music school about as self-taught as you can be about it. Like, I didn't really talk to my teachers about it very much. My teachers kind of knew what I was doing a bit, but they didn't totally understand what I was doing because the choices that I was making were not the choices that they would make, like my composition teachers or whatever. Um, so I think it's a set of sounds that you learn to develop like some fluency with to do what you want to do. Um, and then the question is whether you need other tools from other types of music theory, not just like parts of music theory, but like types of music theory. Because to me, music theory just means like using any means other than actually making a sound to describe why a sound is doing what it's doing. Um, so there's like the music theory of European music from like the beginning of the Renaissance through the present, which is what most people are or through like 1900, which is what most people are talking about when they say music theory. Um, but I theorize about like talking heads all day in my head, just like being like, why does that work? Like, why are they doing that? And the framework that I've developed for myself to make sense of like what's going on in talking heads, like beyond the fact that like a lot of the stuff that I like is like in the Dorian mode, like that doesn't really explain what's going on. And if you're like, it's just in the Dorian mode, whatever, then you haven't done anything to solve the problem, because a lot of music's in the Dorian mode, but like not everything does to me what Remain in Light does to me, you know? So I think it's like if you're trying to work with just intonation in a way that really recreates what was going on in like 19th century German music or whatever, like Wagner or something, which is like some people are really into that. There's this composer Georg Friedrich Haas who's working, and he teaches at Columbia, so he's like in New York, but he's basically using just intonation to like continue the German tradition, which is like, so in order to understand that music, it helps to like know the German tradition. Whereas like Lamont Young, like studied with Stockhausen and stuff, and was really like interested in parts of like serialism and like atonal music, but he was also really into like Hindustani music and like the sound of the tambura. And so his earliest like just intonation pieces, but kind of before he started really working with just intonation, were almost these like pranks where there's one, maybe you've heard about this piece, it's like composition 1960 number 7 or something, and it's just a perfect fifth between like it's like B and F sharp, like right near middle C on the piano, and it says to be played for a long time, and that's like the whole score. And
Oh,
the idea, it's become this whole conceptual thing where like, when he was like in his 70s, he was organizing these like 6 hour long performances of it and talking about why it's really profound. And when he does it at that age, it is really profound. Early on, it was like a prank because it was like Fluxus and stuff. But all that he really knew was that something would happen when things were almost in tune, and then they would get in tune, and then they would fall back out of tune. And like, there's like a magic to that. And that was enough for him to make music with that, you know? So like different solutions, or like the James Tenney piece that we just listened to. James Tenney's just like, I love the way this sounds, and like if you try to make sense of how the notes unfold, I haven't really analyzed the whole piece. I've just looked at like the first page and listened to it. But you might find other questions that understanding like the interval relationships according to whole numbers, like in other words the just intonation thing, oh, this is a 5/4 major third or whatever, you might find other questions like why does this note show up, like or even you can understand why that note shows up mathematically, but it's still a big musical decision, you know and you can realize that the just intonation stuff, which lets you explain like how you can create that note like mathematically, doesn't answer the artistic question at all. It's like when you start to find these other questions, then the just intonation framework or the just intonation toolkit can't really help you because it's like a toolkit, and like if you have like a hammer, like there are things that a hammer can't help you with, that there are other things that you might need to like make a shelf or something, you know so yeah, so that's kind of how I think about it. Like for me, my approach really came from like really liking like the sound of feedback on guitars, like modal jazz and like spiritual jazz, kind of liking the sort of like emo music thing where everything's in like one key, like they don't really modulate, so you could call it like pandiatonicism, just diatonicism or just the major scale all the time. But it's never cliched like 4 chord, 5 chord. It's like there are just new colors and therefore like new feelings that are happening all the time. But you can't really, at least I can't aurally identify often exactly what the chord is, because there are like so many notes in the chord but it's not dissonant and it's not like the sound of keys changing like in jazz or there are chord changes. And so having basically those three things and understanding how like jazz harmony works, pretty for me that was what gave me a lot of my like technique with notes, was just like knowing like a shit ton of jazz chords on the guitar and like knowing enough about that to be like, oh, like I like when there's this crunchy thing in the middle of the chord, but like it's a really nice interval from top to bottom. That was enough for me to start working with these things and find solutions that felt right for me. And then there were things that I was doing that it took me years to understand because they weren't answerable through questions about harmony. It was like questions about form that it took me a long time to answer, or like questions about like duration, like why should something go on for a long time, like what is the effect of something going on for a long time, like all that stuff. Like those are deeper questions that like become philosophical questions and like actual like like I was like reading philosophy, like actual philosophy, to try to understand it, and it helped. So, and there are like three philosophers that are like really really good for all of this too. So but yeah, so that's kind of my feeling about the music theory thing. It's a very long answer, but hopefully it's like a real answer, you know?
Yeah, it's an amazing answer. Who are the philosophers that you were
Yeah. Okay, so the most important philosopher for duration, or the philosopher who actually coined the term duration in the sense that we think about it now, as far as I know, is this guy, Henri Bergson, um, who has a few books that are really helpful. One that's really good is it's like it's like an essay on, there's like a whole preamble, but basically it's called Time and Free Will. And it's pretty short and like for just like straight up metaphysics, it's pretty approachable. Like actual, not like occult metaphysics, but like straight up like academic philosophy metaphysics, Time and Free Will. And then there's another one called Matter and Memory that's a lot less approachable, and rehashes a lot of what's in Time and Free Will. But he wrote it afterwards. Like Time and Free Will, he wrote when he was a student, and Matter and Memory is like just like here's what it is. And then the other one is like my guy Gilles Deleuze, who's like my like great, like I'm super super into Deleuze. Deleuze wrote a book called Bergsonism. What Bergsonism? And there's actually like a techno DJ in New York called Bergsonist, and like I think it's a she. I think she's really into Bergson. That's what's going on. Okay, and then the last one, and to me this is like the holy grail of like duration, um, is but you so okay, yeah. So this is like kind of like the holy grail of like this stuff. It's Difference and Repetition by Deleuze. And actually my teacher, who was like my mentor and my like really important composition teacher, who I studied with for 2 years after undergrad, the first time I talked to him I mentioned that I wanted to read this book, and he was like, composers say they want to read that, it doesn't have anything to do with repetition, it's like about Plato, and like, or about like this thing that Plato got wrong, according to Deleuze, that all of philosophy got wrong after Plato. And like that's kind of true, but it is also actually about repetition, and it's really really good. It's like one of the most important, like it was actually enough that it kind of killed the mystery for me. And I read it and I was like, oh, right, that's what's going on. But the thing is, like, you can jump into Time and Free Will, like, with like no background because he's not citing other philosophers. I think you can do Matter and Memory that way. The Deleuze text on Bergson's like 70 pages. And I think the only person he talks about it in it is Bergson. And then Difference and Repetition is like there's like a lot of preliminary reading that makes it a lot easier. So if you go in blind, that's going to be a lot more difficult. I spent like it was like my mission for a while to read the things that would let me read Difference and Repetition, and I'm really glad that I did. For me, Difference and Repetition actually didn't take that long. I think because I was just like really determined to do it. But it is much more like it's like a contribution, because like Bergson was really like a mathematician who like wrote some philosophy but was really basing it off of what he knew about his mathematics, and he was popular for a while and then everybody stopped talking about him, and like Deleuze sort of like repopularized Bergson, but like integrated him into like the Western tradition more, like Western philosophical tradition. And so that's really like it's just a lot more work because he's just talking about like so many philosophers, and like it's much more like this is how this relates to everything else. So that's my super long answer.
Wow. Yeah, no, this is awesome. It's funny. I never like I know of Deleuze, of course, but I never really got into him. I was hoping to go to grad school for psychoanalysis when I graduated college, and I always got like super into, and I got into like Lacan a lot, like around that time, but I never really got into Deleuze in the way that I probably should have. So this could be a good entry point. Kills
Yeah.
multiple in stone. But um, yeah, this is awesome. Thank you so much. You know, you were talking about how you were taking away time from me. This is probably the best conversation I'll have all week. So
Okay, I've
uh,
got one more thing about Deleuze and Lacan really quick. So
yeah,
people,
yeah.
people associate them with each other because Deleuze started writing with this guy Felix Guattari in like 68, I think, or 69. And Guattari was like a like disciple of Lacan who like broke from it, and Deleuze and Guattari wrote a book together called Anti-Oedipus that like basically like made Lacan like outdated, and like Lacan tried to like stop the publication of the book and tried to like ruin their careers because he thought they were like trying to ruin his career. All this crazy stuff happened, but that was like one book that associates Deleuze with Lacan. And all of this stuff, Bergsonism, indifference, and repetition, was like the first stage of Deleuze's career. And basically, what he outlines in Difference and Repetition, and almost everything that he wrote leading up to Difference and Repetition, um, sets him on like a very specific professional track that he writes one more book that continues this project sort of. It's kind of like a step to the side. And then I think it's just like the 68 protests happen in Paris, and like he starts probably doing acid and like hanging out with Guattari, and they write Anti-Oedipus. And that's where Deleuze becomes the person that people think of him as being, which is just like this like completely insane, like experimental post-structuralist philosopher. But the early stuff and the stuff that's probably influenced me most is his straight up kind of like most like academic writing where like introduce a point and then he'll follow it up with another point and like build out a system. And as you're reading it, you're like, oh yeah, oh that relates to the last thing. Oh, that relates to the last thing. And you get to the end of the book and you're like, oh, okay. You know, whereas like once he starts writing with Guattari, it changes a lot and the subject matter also really changes. So that's also just a thing, is that this is just kind of a different stage of his career. I'm just really into this because I'm really, really, really into Deleuze. Like it's like my like it's like what I do for it's like my hobby or something.
Right, right, right.
Yeah. So anyway, that's just like a thing about it that I felt compelled to share, I guess, because people mention Lacan and it's like kind of related, but like only kind of. So anyway, super fun to talk about this stuff, and I'm here every week. So
Yeah, thank you so much for all of this, Cole. Indescribable how much I could say that this will help me out a lot, and you know, you could probably bet that I'm gonna come back to one of these for sure. But even the fact that you went 33 minutes over the hour, so much appreciated.
all
Yeah,
good.
yeah. I'll definitely keep you posted with some of my findings, some of some of what I'm getting acquainted with, and yeah, I'm sure this won't be the last time that we that I hop on here or that we cross paths or anything of the like.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, totally. I mean, also, I'm glad that you asked about this because, like, on my end, it's like now this is like on the website, and there is just like a primer, like introduction to just intonation, which is great. That's like that's a really cool resource to have. So I'm glad. Thanks for showing up and asking about it.
Yeah, yeah. I'm going to this. I don't know if you know Ellen Arkbro. I mean, she's
Oh
with
yeah, Saturday at Blank Forums, right?
Friday. Yeah,
Right.
I'm going to the 7:30 one. I think it was sold out, but yeah, that's the next one. Maybe I'll do some, yeah, I'd like to get some studying in and maybe see if there's certain things that I could pick up or whatnot, though I can't imagine it'd be too likely, but just to go in with a different perspective than just a listener, I think would be really interesting.
Totally. Yeah, I want to go to that. I hope it's not sold out. But yeah, sweet. That's exactly the right thing to go see after we talked about this. That's so
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So is it just this time every week, Monday at from 6 to 7 that you're doing this?
yeah. And then I think 2 weeks from now it'll be like a different day of the week. But other than that, yeah, Mondays.
Cool, cool. Yeah, awesome. I'll definitely be back, and this was excellent. I can't thank you enough.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for showing up and asking about it.
Yes. All right, have a wonderful night. I have all these references in my notes, so I'll be sure to take a look at them, and yeah, looking forward to speaking with you soon.
Awesome. Yeah. Take care, Jason.
Bye-bye. Have a good one.